Here we are again. We're going to build the D2 Delta Twin. This is going to be the build video. And this here is the prototype that you've seen in the videos flying. I love it. Ultimately one of my favorite twin and delta wing planes for FPV. I'm having a blast. It's really a lot of fun. And it's really a pretty straightforward build. I've got here the foam board cut. We're going to go ahead and build it. To get started, you'll want to go to printables.com. The link is down below, where you can download the PDF files for the template, as well as all the STL files for the wheels, the camera mount, the control horns, and the motor mounts. This is the 3D printed files that you'll need. The important ones are the motor mounts. As I mentioned earlier, you'll get the ones that fit the whole pattern for the motors that you're planning to use. This is my 180-degree servo for the camera pan. This is the TPU for the landing gear, the main landing gear on the bottom. This is the plate that'll hold on the inside. And here's the wheels. These are one of my favorite elements of the build. As you can see, they are TPU and they're hollow. They're like a real tire. And to assemble these, you basically, I like to put the smooth side out and I come from the back. And you just stretch it a little bit while you put it on, and it folds right on. It's nice and snug. That's not going to come off even on some hard landings. But that's all you have to do. This is the main wing. It also has the hatch as well as the elevons that are cut. The elevon hinge is just cut part way through. So as we remove it, and we flip it over, you'll see that the top side is not cut all the way through. But just remove all the pieces, whether you're cutting it by hand or if you have it cut out by someone. I've purchased some carbon fiber sticks. Now these are flat, 1 millimeter thick by 4 millimeters tall. I like these. They work like an I-beam. So when you put them in the foam in a slot, it's very difficult for them to bend in that direction because you have about 4 millimeters and it's being held on the sides by the foam. So I'm gonna put a half a stick up here in front of the hatch near the leading edge, and I'll put a whole stick, and these are 500 millimeters long. For the carbon, we're coming at this from the bottom of the wing. That way the top of the wing isn't disturbed as much. And this is about a 28, just over 28 inches, so about 14 inches is your center line. I'm just gonna do a very, very light line where we're gonna cut part way through, and then we'll go from there. So once you cut part way through, I just like to run the carbon through it. Careful not to puncture through. I'm just kind of test fitting this in. So I've added a bead of tacky glue and then press the carbon in there. To allow that to dry and then not move too much, I'm gonna go ahead and add some pieces that are gonna be permanently there. Again, now just cut this slot only part way through. Once that's dry, we'll put a piece of tape over it. For the hinge, you just want to cut part way through and then all the way through right here. Bend it until it cracks. You'll hear it open. And then go ahead and lay it back. And this is the top of the wing, and we're going to remove the bottom edge right there. This takes a little bit of practice, and there's some tools that you can use, but you just want to remove 45-degree angle, 3 to 4, about a 4 millimeter strip, taking care not to cut into the hinge. So you get a little bit of down deflection and the up. It really helps to have a sharp blade. Adding the tape to the hinge will just make the paper last. This is not a waterproof foam, and if water gets into the hinge, it could separate from the foam. Now we're going to do the top KF4 airfoil. This also includes the hatch. This file we accidentally cut through where the hinge is going to be. So before taking this out, I'm going to add some tape here that is going to be the hinge for the hatch to keep those pieces together. But we'll go ahead and pop this out. Now I know these pieces here are pretty thin. Just be gentle with them. They're going to be glued to the top of this other foam board, so it's going to be okay. And to finish off this hinge, I'm going to go ahead and tape the inside of the hinge so that it won't pull the paper away from the foam. And we'll line it up on here just to test fit, see how the hatch lines up. There we go. Make sure we have the bottom, and let's start adding some of the tacky glue. This stuff doesn't, you know, it dries pretty quick, especially with the paper, but it soaks in a little bit and it does pretty good with the paper and the foam board. But I like to tack some of the edges with hot glue because that dries really quick. You can use any glue here you want. What we'll do is we'll now test fit this. Make sure you line up the trailing edge and the wingtips and the nose. If you need to, just use a little bit of hot glue on the corners for quick dry, and it'll hold the rest in place while the slower glue dries. Looks nice and flat and straight. It's good. The fuselage here is probably the trickiest part, but even that is pretty straightforward. You'll see that there's sections where the paper is only cut on one side for fold lines, where they're going to fold together. And then there's also sections where you remove the foam and paper so that the fuselage can fold up the sides, as well as the nose will fold and wrap around. When you have it cut out, it should look like this with the extra cut lines. For the nose, we'll just remove the paper from the sides so that it'll curve a little bit. You notice that this is the bottom of the nose. We'll remove that paper as well, and this paper. And this little tip right here, we're gonna remove the paper and the foam and leave the outer paper that'll wrap around to make a clean edge. Now we're going to remove some of the paper from the inside of the nose. And this piece right here on the nose, we're going to remove the foam and the paper. So we're just going to leave the paper flat. At this point, we're going to help the fold lines. Where these are cut part way through, I'm just going to run a tool. You can use a screwdriver. Just don't press it all the way through. It's just going to give a little bit more relief to that section so that when you push it together, it'll fold. You know, just fold it so the paper goes on the bottom edges, creates the bottom of our airplane, and then we're going to glue these together. On the nose here, where it's going to have a sharp fold, I'm going to remove about a 45-degree angle of the foam on both sides so that it will have a sharp fold for the hinge. From that should give us a nice sharp fold when we force that over. We're going to glue down this paper on the front real quick. In the cockpit, a clean look. Glue down these. You don't need a whole lot, but make sure you have a good bead. Make sure you're square too. Just put it into the corner here. All right, let's see here. That's looking good. Could it be any easier? No, probably not. Before gluing up the nose, we want to add some of the curve to it so that it's not fighting the foam board when it's being glued together. And you can just use your hand, kind of test fit that, but give it a good curve. Same with the sides, so that they want to come in a little bit, and you'll see it come in. And then test fit this up. Perfect. Let's just do the bottom part real quick to the fold. Don't want to burn your hands, so be careful. Not perfect, but it'll float. On the inside of the main fuselage, we're going to have some components, Velcro and or a Velcro strap that goes through. So sometimes I like to put a little bit of tape on the inside to give it a little extra skin to the foam board. You don't have to do the whole bottom, just the main section where you know you're going to have components in the belly, and that's just the middle section. That'll cover us on the landing gear plate as well as where the Velcro goes for the battery. I'm going to build this one a little different than I did the prototype because I want to cover it with colored packing tape. And so I'm going to fit the fuselage in where it goes, and then I'm going to glue the bottom KF airfoil in place, and then we can remove the body again before we finalize that in there. You can recognize these pieces because they have the slots for the motor, and of course there'll be one per side. We'll glue them to the main wing. Again, this is not glued in yet, but we're going to glue them where they need to go, and then we'll shape the leading edge and start some of the coloring. Make sure you line it up for the leading edge. You want everything to be square. For the leading edge, I bevel a 45-degree angle just on the upper and lower edge. The centerpiece you don't have to cut into. And then we will apply tape over the leading edge. You don't need to cut this piece because that's going to be under the motor mount. This is just like you do to the hinge lines, except it's going to be the leading edge. We're going to do that to the top end, to the bottom. Now we're going to add tape to the leading edge. I actually prefer to tape any part of the foam board that I touch with my hands because it tends to collect a lot of oil, and I often pick up my airplanes by the leading edge of the wing, and also this will just make it more aerodynamic and add a skin to the leading edge. It doesn't have to adhere perfectly flat, but it's going to seal that paper edge. It's okay if you overlap just a little bit. We can trim it with the blade. Okay, the leading edges are cut and taped. I've also taped wherever I might touch on the bottom, and we'll need to make sure we remove any tape that may cover these slots for the motor mounts. From here, we can start adding some color to the main wing, and then we'll glue on the fuselage. Using the colored packing tape, I've added some color. You can add this however you want. No real tricks to it. I also use some of the clear packing tape for the areas where my hands may touch the foam board. There are sections that are not covered with tape. When joining the fuselage to the main wing, you can use pretty much any glue you want. If you want to just use hot glue, that's fine too. I'm going to use both hot glue and some of the white tacky glue. I'm going to put some of that in the slots. These pieces here. I'm going to add some tape to the fuselage section where the landing gear is going to go, and that's pretty much straight up from where the wing meets the body. The motor mounts are these two pieces here, and they fold and build very similar to the fuselage, where you remove the line of foam in between. The sides will fold on top of the foam. So test fit the motor pod, and it should fit nice and snug. Make sure the square edge goes out to the front for the motor mount to mount here. I also put tape around the last piece to prepare from the foam board is the rudder. We can hinge this, apply some color and tape, just crack the rudder, fold over, and then we're going to cut a relief line. Then I'm going to apply some clear tape on the outside. The other thing I like to do is add a bubble of tape over the leading edge here. And here's the quick test fit of the rudder and fin. If you go on the printables.com for the listing, under the other files, down below that there are several different versions of PDF, and you can print the one for the main landing gear, and this shows the front view and the top view of the bend section. This is the tail wheel, and we'll do that later. But this is designed for 3/32 gauge, which I think is about 2.4 millimeters or 2.3 in diameter. This was available on Amazon, and I'm going to give it a try. The total length with the bend in the middle should use that entire bar. The other thing is, this is the bottom plate that's going to go on the bottom of the airplane, and these flaps will hold the wire in place, and you can just test to see that the bends will go right into the holes. This wire is exactly 1 foot long, or 12 inches. Halfway will be the 6. And I'm going to mark that center line. We'll line it up on the center here. And we need a bend here. That's pretty flat. We'll go from there. We need to have a bend here, here, and here. Spend a little time making sure it's straight, how you want it. Make sure the angles are about right. And then we'd mount this like this. Go ahead and we can just shove this in here. Into the back first. TPU is amazing for what we're doing. A little bit of spring and give, that's great. The tail wheel wire is the same wire that we use for the push rods, and I have this 1.5 millimeter diameter music wire that I purchased in bulk from Amazon. The link is down below. This is the side view of the rudder. This will go on the top of the rudder. This goes down the hinge of the rudder. This extends below the plane, and this is the bend right here, coming, if you can imagine it coming out of the paper, for the tail wheel. Now if you notice that this is the part that the wheel's going to be on, it's at 90 degrees to the front piece, because this is the part that's going to be in the rudder, held by the control horns. But I do a little bit of a bend relief for the tire. You see it here, looking straight down, and you can give it a little bit more if you want it. These control wire or easy connects, they work great as wheel collars as well. If you're running low on smaller wheel collars, we'll just tighten that down. Make sure you give enough room for that wheel to spin. For the main landing gear and wheels retention, I'm basically putting a retainer on the inside to reduce binding against the bend. In preparing the main landing gear, I just want to make sure the holes line up for the plate that's going to go on the inside with the holes from the TPU. I'm going to be putting the landing gear, the leading edge of this TPU is almost perfectly aligned with the leading edge of the wing. Using a punch tool or a wire or something sharp, you can either mark it with a pen or just puncture it through. I've got everything lined up where I want it. I'm going to go straight down in. This is just going to create the hole for the bolt, and then I'll widen it out here in a second. We got the inside plate with the bolts coming through the bottom. The tail wheel is connected into the rudder, and then we have a special control horn that will also bolt over it. This will be embedded in the foam. This will be the backside to hold it on with a nylon nut and bolt. Where the corner meets the bottom edge of the rudder, we can push in, make a little indent where this wire is going to be. Now we know where it is. When you do the control horn here, you want it to be just a hair above that, and then the holes to line up directly over the hinge line. Just push and put a little indent in there. One thing I like to do, because I already got tape on the back side of this where that's going to be, we're going to add some more tape to this area just to strengthen the surface area and spread the tension over a larger area. Some tape, I'm going to line it up in here. I'm not cutting all the way through, just enough to get it into the foam here. This is where the wire is going to live in the rudder. We'll test fit this real quick. Good. Perfect. I'm going to add tape across the bottom here, and then we're actually going to add another zip tie to hold the bottom piece on. In just a minute. We're going to add a zip tie around this section in the bottom, but we're going to clip a piece of it to be a brace on the other side. Mount this through. Once you get it started, clip a piece of this off to use on the other side, and then you tighten that down on it. The back end of the airplane has a small opening in it, but it's not nearly big enough to allow the airflow that comes in the nose to cool the Vista air unit or the components on the inside. So we have the air vents. You can scale these up a little bit if you want to make them bigger, but the idea is to put them in the back. Find where you want to put it, put a little positive pressure on it to indent into the foam, and then just cut a hole and glue it in. I like the vent to come out the back. We're going to add the control horns to the elevons here. And so I'm going to do them about 3 centimeters from the cut line here. This is the servo I like to use. It's the MG90D. It's a digital servo with metal gears. Take note where the carbon fiber is in the wing, and I can barely see the faint black line through the paper here. And we're going to cut as close as we can to the inside of the cockpit to this side, and the other one for the other elevon on the other side, and the rudder will be slightly offset. You can mount the rudder servo in the center, but I'm doing it slightly offset so that the control wire will be pretty straight coming back. Before you set up your control rods, it's always a good idea to test the center and the function of every servo. I've attached the control horns with the Easy Connects and the 1.5 millimeter control rod using a Z-bend. And now I've lifted the tail end of the body with a roll of tape right here, and we're going to fit the rudder and glue it in to the socket and make sure it's at 90 degrees. Attach the control wire and the Easy Connect. Just a little bit about the electronics here. If you're new to twins, basically you run each motor on their own speed controller. I'm also running the BEC, battery eliminating circuit, to power the receiver from one of them. One you'll want to remove the red wire from. Now, each of these speed controllers I set up with their own little XT30. That way it fits through the little slot when I plug them into the plane. And then inside the plane, I have a little Y splitter here that allows me to take it from a regular HT60 out to the individual ESCs for full power to them, right directly from the battery. And then I also split off the power that goes to my OSD to give me my on-screen display. So make sure that when you test up with and connecting to the speed controller, that one rotates one direction and one rotates the other direction. A word about the receivers. The way that I have programmed each channel to run for differential on the motors, as well as the rudder channel, the camera pan, and the elevons, it requires me to have 6 at minimal channels. Since I run an arm switch for my OSD, that puts it on channel 7. And so I am running an 8-channel PWM receiver. Now, if you want to go and use a 4-channel or 5-channel, you can. You may miss out on the differential between the motors, and that's totally fine. You can run a Y cable for the signal to the speed controllers. That way they both get the same PWM signal for throttling up and throttling down. And then you can also, the pan is also optional if you want to do that. Setting up the radio for the twin is going to be another video, since it is quite involved and there will be a lot more to cover. I'm going to open up a little slot right here on this, right next to the KF airfoil, to allow my electronics to go into the model. The motor mounts can be glued in place, or I simply like to pop a zip tie through here. Okay, I've installed the motors, the speed controllers, the radio system is all connected to all the servos, including adding the camera mount with the camera pan servo, the DJI Vista antenna. I did end up cutting a hole and making a standoff for that, just to raise it up out of the body a little bit. It still is a little bit of a bird's nest, but I've got the battery strap and the battery cable right here. Powers up my OSD and all the servos, everything, and it's ready to roll. And the only thing I have now is we're gonna put zip ties to hold the camera plate in place. The GPS is underneath here as well, but this allows me to get in here and change it if I need to. Again, I've added a skin of tape that loops around to the inside and the outside. That'll give us a good bite. At this point, the model is ready to go out and ground test. The next video is up. We'll be setting up the radio for the differential thrust on the motors, switching between the rudder and the front pan servo in flight, and the wing mixing. As always, get out there and fly, and thanks for watching.
She goes all day.